Well, welcome back to the Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You podcast. My name is Sean Langwell, and I am your host. And we got a very special guest that I'm going to let sit in the wings here for a second, then we'll introduce him. But if you like honest, vulnerable, and real stories about what it takes to not only become great, but self-confident and bold enough to be yourself, then this show is for you. And it's called Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You for a reason. And today I'm going to break one of my own unspoken rules because I can and because it's way more fun. Here's the irony. Normally, I don't walk in with a preset list of questions for my guests, but today is different. Today is special. And the best gift I can offer this man is to give him complete freedom and latitude to just be himself. Michael Pritchard won the comedy competition in 1980, also was a probation officer in the state of California the same year. Mike is a veteran and military medic, served in Vietnam, uh, had evac flights, still teaches anti-bullying for the junior giants, is well known at schools after shootings, filmed dozens of specials and series for PBS in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and continues to raise funds for Catholic organizations across America. He did thousands of voices, thousands and thousands of voices for Disney, PBS, Lucasfilms, and more. He has many kids he helped in his kid and his own three and many grandkids who are his medicine. We're going to talk about medicine. He has been married to wife Mary Jo Bannon Pritchard for 46 years. He is still a happy man featured in Tom Shadyak's The Happy Movie, studied on Netflix, Neuroscience of Happiness. Welcome, Mr. Michael Pritchard.
Thank you very much, Sean. Pleasure to be with you, buddy.
Oh God, this is gonna be fun. So I got a script here, but when I start looking at a script, it screws me up. So what I would like for you to do is put on your little Bullwinkle and hat and go into Mr. Pritchard's Wayback Machine and take us
Oh,
back to some of those early years because I was watching some of your videos and you have this including the one with I think it's your grandson, and you're just doing the whole gamut of voices. Go back to some of those beginnings and where Michael Pritchard got the start to be who you are today. And we're gonna just fast forward through this. It's your show. Take a little walk down Michael Pritchard memory lane for us.
sounds good, Sean. Well, one of the great things that I try to tell, because I was an ADHD kid in elementary school, I had never had anything above a C in school. And I was a C student and had a glorious time. But I was perspicacious. Now, that's a big word, but it means having a greater emotional intelligence than the average person. And
Hmm.
perspicacious or perspicacity is a great super uh, talent that you have, a superpower, if you will, and especially for people that are neuroplastic or neurodivergent. And I was that little boy that had intuitive excellence at an early age, emotional in every way, more interested in emotional intelligence in the room than learning things. And it paid off immensely as I aged, and I found that talent because you'll find as you grow older with neuroplasticity, neurodiversity, that your system adjusts because you're learning what you would call coping mechanisms for them.
Hmm.
And I was that kid, and I was fawny from the very beginning. One of the nuns punched me in the back of the head, and the whole classroom gasped. And there was all of the girls were like total Catholic schoolgirls in seventh and eighth grade, and they would go, oh! And I had brothers who beat me up way worse than anybody. with the nuns habit on, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I came forward and I looked back up and I did the cartoon, and the classroom erupted in laughter. And the
Mm.
nun was livid, and she walked out of the classroom in a rage, But I was still standing there, and there was a kid in our class who was an absolute high functioning autism spectrum kid. We loved him, but he had never laughed the entire time we were there. I'll shift the name so it's now, we'll just call him John.
Sure.
But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, his laugh was a piercing. He was, and I go, oh, I get just get extra credit for making John laugh. And he was a kid who came from a tough background. Father was a factory worker, and the kid was a super genius 180 IQ guy. And it was my way of, in some ways, getting him into the classroom, laughing with us. And I said, I should get credit for making John laugh. And years later, they told me, because his father was abusive, that he said to a couple of the girls that I went to school with, Pritchard's laughter made me free, because I thought, if I can laugh at my father being abusive and make fun of him, and it worked. He stopped being abusive. He stopped because he thought I was ridiculing him for just that. And he said it worked. And, Pritchard had shown me a pathway away from that abuse. And I always tell young kids with neurodivergency, if they have ADHD, dyslexia, if they have what you would call autism spectrum, use humor as your pathway away from that. And that's what I did with Robin Williams and other of the young people on the comedy scene. I was older when I hit town here. I was, 29. And when I met all these guys, a lot of them, Sean, were neurodivergent with learning differences. And you have to tell them, help them find what you have found for the mental acuity to survive. And not just, I don't want to say survive. What I want to say is prevail and overcome.
Mm-hmm. And that's the story of your whole life, and we'll
Yes.
get out there. But that's why I wanted to come back here, so that folks listen to the show who are in the throes of it, who don't have somebody like you to walk in the classroom yet.
Right.
That's why I do this show, Michael, is so that we get a chance to put this out there. If somebody has it, then they can find it and they can hear your voice and not mine, because you're the one that's out there on the front lines doing it.
I understand completely what you're saying. And I am, because the kids are hilarious. They teach you, when kids have superpowers, they have a genius levels of accommodating a system. There's a great line by Admiral Hyman Rickover. He said, if you're going to sin against God, not the bureaucracy. At least God will forgive you. That's a good line, because systems are set not to accommodate you, but to make you be more like the system. And that doesn't work with those learning differences. You see it in autism, you see it in dyslexia, you see it in so many of the great geniuses of the world have been autism spectrum, ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. They're teaching this stuff at Stanford now. Dr. Fung, who's a medical doctor, teaches this. So what I try to tell everybody, and I mean this sincerely, one of the great gifts is having been like, you would call me the lab rat for success. I figured it out. I got through the labyrinth of the school systems to be able to come back and teach. Okay, this way, gang. Here's the light. Follow me. Light your candles. Come with me. And I'll be leading some with candles behind me, but I'll also be following the candles of some who I've awakened, if that makes sense. There's a great line by the French writer Vignel. In order to make your dreams come true, the most important thing you must do is wake up. And it's true. It's true.
It's
You
so
have
true.
to-
So what age group? I know you taught. What subject did you teach and what grade?
Well, I taught, I taught anti-bullying all across America,
Okay.
but I taught kindergarten to university level, Sean. I'm still in university on Zoom and talking, saying, look, when you see the amount of addiction problems that we have, and we've lost so many young people to addictions from learning differences, the system cannot understand.
Right.
And there was a writer, George Lucas, God bless him. He started with Edutopia, and I worked for him for years. But
I haven't heard that in forever. When I was at Mix Magazine, I got a rare chance to go out there and be at Skywalker Sound, and I didn't know anything about Edutopia, but what a dynamite program. I completely forgot about it and haven't
oh
heard
yeah,
of it.
completely undervalued and underappreciated by people that were interested in George was a genius at this because he had that kind of neuroplasticity, as did Spielberg, as do many of the great directors. They're never going to tell you that. I don't
Right.
know if you knew this, but in the 1900s, many families from wealth and privilege shuttered their children away if they were dyslexic or whatever. And they called it, wait for this, look it up, folks. I can't make this up. The disappointment room.
Whoa.
Correct.
You need to
Where
write a
the
book on
nanny and the
this.
nurse took care of you. And it was because they didn't want to be bothered with your affliction. And so you were taken to some place to deal with it. Very prevalent in those days, Sean. Very prevalent. And
This is
why
beyond.
the
Oh, go ahead.
freedom to be me and to be able to talk like this in front of people, make people go research this. I
Yeah.
can't make this up. But if you saw the amount of people that suicided or became drug addicts or were given what they would call uh, electric shock treatments,
Hmm.
or they had their brains operated on, and it was, it didn't make any sense because they were just trying to be themselves with their superpowers that weren't recognized in those days. But you know who's recognizing it now, Sean? The National Security Agency, because they're recruiting people who are coders. They're recruiting people with amplified, unbelievable neuroplasticity to help do things. In Germany, they recruit a lot of autism spectrum people because they're coders. They're geniuses. For sure, Bill Gates. Looking at Bill Gates and all he created, and what we have to understand is and make accommodations for to accept that a system can do incredible damage. And there was a great guy that who was talked about this with autism spectrum, and he's on YouTube on a great animated education reform thing for George Lucas, and he was a doctorate of education and very brilliant, and it's education reform. And he had it animated by RSA Animation. And if you just Google, Dr. Robinson, and he spoke brilliantly about this British guy, and he would lecture on it, write books about it, and it was really important for people to understand. So that when I hit the comedy scene, I was meeting Robin Williams, I was meeting Whoopi Goldberg, every one of them, Danny Glover, being on the streets helping the homeless with Danny Glover, working with Salvation Army and Danny Glover on the streets with homeless veterans, trying to explain to people, look, if we slow down, pump the brakes, and pay attention and try to, and I love this line, it's a line by a kid, Sean, please don't overstand,
Please
don't
don't
understand,
overstand.
don't overstand, don't understand, try to understand.
Holy crap, Michael.
Yeah, fourth grade. Understand. I never heard that word before. And you always hear great lines from little kids. I was up at Hamilton Air Force Base here. They got a great school up there. It's no longer an Air Force base, but we used to operate out of there. But I was laughing because I said, "Hey, boys and girls, this is third and fourth graders." I said, you don't have to make everything, you don't have to blow somebody else's candle out to make sure yours shines brighter. And she raises her hand. This little girl goes, Mr. Michael, if you do go around blowing out other people's candles and bullying them, eventually you'll be the one in the darkness. Now, when a third grade kid teaches you more than your college professors in psychology, that's when we're talking about neuroplasticity. That's when we're talking about that child on my frequency. One time, Sean, when I was in Pismo Beach at a high school, I get up and one of my standard things was to get the kids who are suffering from being punched, kicked, laughed at, spit on, shunned, shamed, ridiculed for whatever their neurodivergent, neuroplastic life had led them to. And I said, who can share what it feels like to be picked on, teased, laughed at, shunned, shamed, or ridiculed? First one up is an autism spectrum kid. Gets up in front of the whole school at Pismo Beach.
Hmm.
And he goes, you all call me the school loser, the school loner, the school shooter, but none of you have gotten to know me. I'm graduating this year and I never had a friend. And I do hide out in the cafeteria and I do hide out in the library. It's not because of that. I just can't stand loud noises. I have Asperger, high functioning autism, and I know I have to get on to my next step, which would be college, where it will be softer. Because believe it or not, teenagers are really mean. And all of you should get this. You should get to know me. You should try to understand me. And you should try to become my friend because chances are ever increasing. You're gonna maybe have a kid like me one day. And then what will you do?
Out of the mouths of babes, right?
Always,
You know,
always. The greatest wisdom, the source of wisdom is vulnerable innocence, Sean. And do you know why so many firemen and cops are mostly neurodivergent? Because this is an easier, working against fire, working against injustice is such an easier course for the superhero.
hmm. My
I
father
got
was a
into being a
father
probation
was a
officer for
fireman.
that very reason. I
Yeah.
saw the injustice and I saw so many kids, and then I worked in the prison system. When I was in the prison system, how do you explain that to people? You go in, I'm in way far up Alaska, and I go to one of the prisons and I do a big show, and then I get off and I'm standing there, and the warden goes, "Hey, could you visit our art group?" And I go, "Oh yeah, absolutely." So I walk in and the guy's standing there, and I go, "This is remarkable work. I can't believe this, Stu Wash. This is like something that Picasso would draw, or maybe Leonardo da Vinci would sculpt. This is remarkable work." Yes, Mike, I had a lot of time on my hands to do this work. I have been sentenced here for a while. I go, how did you get through to start just doing this? And he goes, at first it was boredom, but then I figured a pathway to help my younger brothers from the tribes. I
Hmm.
wanted them to find what I find in the genius inside us, in that art, in that music, in that theater, in that dance is the answer to all the prayers we give Great Spirit. And I'm like, okay, wow. And
Yeah.
then you must bury that in your soul to
Mhm.
repeat at other locations to help people.
Yeah.
Because when you're doing that, you're bringing freedom to the person in prison. There's a poem that says, two men stared out from prison bars. One saw mud, but one saw stars. And so for us, it's trying to find ways to help them repent and find a better, softer way. And that goes throughout history to repent comes from the term metanoia, which means change of heart. And of course, Ebenezer Scrooge, one day I was sitting with the kids over in the canal here, and I was talking to them, and Pepe, their principal, I've known since he was a little boy out in the west end of the county. He's just a remarkable guy. He's become a principal. And I had all these kids in there. It was Christmas time, and I'm chit-chat with them, and I says, hey, there's wealthy people here in Marin. They have a lot of money, but they're still brokenhearted. And one of them goes, "Say what you mean. What do you say about? How can you have everything and be?" I said, "Well, Charles Dickens said, Scrooge was a clucking, grasping, wheezing, skin-flint tyrant. But Scrooge, well, he was as solitary as an oyster in his pain. I said, boys and girls, can you imagine that? Solitary as an oyster. Nobody will ever get to know me and my sorrows. Nobody will ever get to know me. I'll hide it all inside. I'll be angry and I will not let anybody in. And this little kid, I go, don't you hate that? Doesn't that make you angry? This little kid goes like this. He's like a third grade kid. He's just sitting there watching, studying me.
Yeah.
You know, Mr. Mike, you're teaching us wrong. I go, Raimundo. He was a kid who survived the hurricanes down in Puerto Rico. I said, hey, what am I doing wrong? What am I teaching you this wrong? And he goes, if you hate that person, if you get angry at him, you cannot help them build a rainbow pearl inside the oyster of their heart and soul.
You can't make this stuff up.
That boy's that's what his mama teaches him. That's what his mama teaches him. And I was emotional. I said, you know what, Raimundo? I'm going to tell you something, brother. You were right and I was wrong. And he goes like this. Just saying.
Just saying. You just reminded me of something. I don't want to, I'm still all about you, but you just brought me back to
Go ahead.
a scene that my mom told me. I don't recall this, but I was probably 3.5, 4 years old. My dad had gone through the firefighter training for city of San Francisco, San Francisco County. And she used to just get uptight at me and she'd yell at me for the smallest things. And I don't remember what she yelled me at, but I just stopped. And the way she told the story, she says, you said something to me, son, that I'll never forget as long as I live. She said, you told me when you yell at me, it's like you're sticking pins in me and I don't like it.
Yes.
And the full circle moment on this, and this is for me for a second, but this is for other people who are at my age who have to do what Michael's talking about for aging parents. It's not easy, folks. There's a lot of baggage there, and
Oh, yeah.
Michael's in our house right now, and I have to navigate some of that and pay back full circle. And I watch myself modeling the same snappiness that she does for me, and I have to catch myself on a daily basis. So this show is about being vulnerable and daring to be great and daring to be you. And I'm going to put it back to you, Michael, but that story just went straight to my heart. What you
Oh,
were
yeah.
talking about, you can't make it up.
Well, the thing I try to tell everybody, because I sit with so many police and fire groups all the time, all of them have PTSD, which is push that stuff down. Like,
Mhm.
and so what happens is when you push that stuff down, it can implode inside you or it can come out as resentment. And anger past 30 seconds is ego. And the ego is not your amigo. And so what you learn more than anything else is to forgive, to live and live to forgive. When you're a parent, be careful of your words. Use your words as shields and not as swords to hurt or wound. And when I was back east, and then I did a thing for SF Fire Department after 9/11. But I spent a lot of time back east in New Jersey and in New York working with kids and filming for PBS. And I told them on 9/11, there was millionaires and billionaires at the top of the World Trade Center waiting to be saved. Coming down those steps were people from Cantor Fitzgerald, from Goldman Sachs. Going up the stairs were working class folks out of Rockville Center. And I went out there to perform for their Catholic church at the request of a family of wealthy folks back there. But what I told them is coming down the steps were all these wealthy men, and going up the steps were heroes, women and men, risking and maybe perhaps giving their lives for all of us. And that means in America. And a guy, who was a remarkable spirit and Reckler. And he was a guy who worked for them and had been a soldier. And he was featured in Mel Gibson's movie. And he was singing a Welsh song as they came down. He was a Welsh immigrant. And he brought remarkable anchored wisdom and courage to people coming down the steps. He goes, "It's a great day for you to prove to be American." Hmm? And then he was singing "Bright and Shining Spears." And this is talked about in the book by a guy, Galloway. And so what you want to do is teach and help people understand that in the times of the most peril, we tend to have that trauma. Trauma comes from the Greek term trauma, which means woundedness. And I started working, I was 17 years old, Sean, when I was working with wounded kids who'd been wounded in the service. And I learned that in order to heal a wound, you have to drain it. Now, to drain the wound and to make the person better, you can choose to make sure as you drain the wound, one of the great and most hopeful ways is prayer and laughter. That's been my go-to. You know, when my father was dying, he was sitting there, he had cancer, and he had smoked all of his life, right? And he was dying of cancer. And he said to me, as we were taking care of him, he said, it's hard for you to understand that Red Cross and Salvation Army might have killed me. I go, "Pop,
Right.
what are you
Nut.
talking about?" And he goes, "Every time we did well in the war, they would come around and I was an officer and they would hand me Lucky Strikes and Pall Mall and Camel and I'd pass them out to the troops." And he goes, "I actually believe that more of my comrades have passed away from tobacco
Mm.
than enemy bullets."
Wow.
I had to take that in as a 17-year-old.
Mm.
And my dad was my football coach too. And just the slightest bit of encouragement comes from that word cour, the French word for heart.
Hmm.
Encourage, give strength to the heart, not discourage, take strength away. And the more we encourage our kids, the stronger they become and the more vital they become because you're teaching them internally. Soft we go with the words. Using your words, as I said, as shields and not as swords to hurt or wound. And when you do that, I noticed that with all my kids and my grandkids. Say soft, kind things, encourage their hearts, lift their spirits, shift their spirits, gift their spirits. Make them understand that this is important. This is what Dickens did in every one of his films. This is what Capra did in every one of his movies. He was a working class guy who was a genius.
Yeah.
He was a genius at explaining American heart. And Mother Teresa, they said, or not Mother Teresa, but Helen Keller, they said, "Oh, Miss Keller, it must be hard for you to be blind." And she said, "Well, it would be if I had no vision.
I
We
love
see
that
with our
movie.
hearts,"
Yeah.
right? And to teach that to the addict and the alcoholic and the person suffering from any rare disease or suffering from something that might take them if they do not find a way to renew, recover, and replenish themselves spiritually and emotionally. And that's how you drain the wound.
You're speaking my language, my friend. My guests know this, and I don't know if you know it, but in October I'll be coming up on 40 years of continuous sobriety, and exactly what Michael's talking about here, what you're talking about, is exactly what I had to do. It was the leveling of my ego and pride to be humble enough to say I need help. Those three words that you're alluding to are the three words that I use over and over again on a daily basis. And when I catch myself trying to do it Frank Sinatra's My Way, I did it my way. It doesn't work, folks. There's too many people out there hurting, right, Michael? And that's the big reason why I wanted you on the show because I have it from one experience and from raising my family, but you were out there with your heart out here for the world to see. And you're going into the schools, you're going into the probation department for a number of years in Marin County, working with my classmate Michael Daly, and just doing beautiful things in the community. And that's a message of hope that's lived out loud.
Yeah. And that redemption comes when you feel, some lady said, I'm going to be 77 tomorrow. And I said, well, you don't look like that. And I said, I'm in a state of grace.
Hmm.
And that means you're blessed. You have less care and concern. And it's a blessing to you to know that, you know, amazing grace, how sweet the sound, it saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. And when I was with Lutheran priests down in the middle of the Central Coast by where Mike Daly is living now, I was laughing because one of the guys goes, and it's a pretty amazing miracle moment. He said, one of the priests, he says, did you know that the first thing you learn on the guitar is there is a house in New Orleans they call the rising sun. It is the ruin of me, a poor boy. In God I know I'm one. And he goes, but you can sing Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. This is a slave trader who wrote that book, and then he redeemed himself because he went to the banks of Africa and in redemption released all the slaves and then wrote that song on the banks of Africa.
I never knew that. And again, you just keep bringing these things up. 1987, Superdome in Seattle. I go to my first world convention for a recovery fellowship, and I'm sitting in there in a stadium packed with 60,000 people who are there for one purpose and one purpose only, to do what you're just talking about.
Right,
I didn't know anything from anything, but when it came time to close that particular session, there were 60,000 people in an arena holding
right,
hands at one time and one voice singing Amazing Grace.
right.
And I hadn't thought of that in years until you just brought it up. And, there is hope.
Always,
There's always hope.
always hope. You never quit 1 minute before the miracle happens.
You don't, and that's why Man's Search for Meaning is still one of the best-selling books of all time behind the Bible and Don Quixote, because
Yep.
we're constantly on this quest and you get your book ripped off and you go out and you go write it anyway.
Yes. Well, the great thing for all of us is to know that there are people in the world who, like I tell all the folks in recovery, sometimes I sit with them and I say, hey, you don't wait for the light at the end of the tunnel. Become the light going through the tunnel and glow in the dark as you go. Bring that light with you, and then they'll follow. And they need to follow. They need to have somebody anchored and a little bit of Solomonic wisdom. I've seen some stuff. You can't. I sat with Tom Ridge, the governor of New York, and it was pretty amazing because he had been in Vietnam. He was a highly decorated combat veteran and went on for George Bush to become the thing. But I was sitting with he and his wife. She's a librarian. And we were talking, and he said, Mike, I grew up hard scrabble, you know. And he goes, my mom was a single mom taking care of me up in Erie, Pennsylvania. You know where that is? And I said, I do, Governor, because my family's Pennsylvanian, from Pennsylvania originally. And he said, yeah. He goes, we lived in government housing. And he goes, but Mike, look around. We're still in government housing, only this is a little nicer. That was the governor's gift.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
There's no stopping who you can become but you. And all you got to do is, Willie Nelson was talking about that with one of the young singers, and he goes, I had to quit drinking because now when I get up there to sing, there's nobody to get in my way. Oh, Willie, man.
Man, it's so funny. And I remember, did you perform at the San Francisco comedy competition in Golden Gate Park? I think it was
Oh yeah, comedy day.
1988,
Yeah.
88 or 90, somewhere in there.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I never remember that. I'm going back there because that was one of those moments where it was open to the public. It was a round robin. You were there,
Yep.
Bobby Slayton,
Yeah.
all of them. Robin did a set, Ellen DeGeneres. I can't remember who else, but it just left me sitting there going, this is amazing that you guys are all out there giving back because we hadn't had Woodstock, we hadn't had, the Summer of Love in a
Yeah.
long time, and you bring all these people into the park to laugh, to enjoy life.
I'm going to make you laugh so hard. I went in because I was friends. One of the policemen who was a good friend of mine, his name was Bernie Shaw, and he had married Patricia Hearst, Patty Hearst.
Oh, wow.
And he was sitting by himself, and I invited him. I said, "Why are you sitting by yourself? Man, that's not healthy." And he goes, "I'm just going through a rough patch." I go, "All right, well, come and sit with me for dinner." And he was working for Frank Jordan, who was the police lieutenant, and at the time in community service. And "What's your name?" "Bernie Shaw." And I said, "Well," I said, he goes, "if your wife's going through a rough time and you're going through a rough time, I'm doing this comedy show with Jerry Seinfeld, Dana Carvey, and Robin Williams." And I said, "We're going to be at the Kabuki Theater. Come down and you can sit with my wife up in the booth." And he said, "Okay." And he came down, was so happy. And we got a picture afterwards that wound up in BAM magazine. But after that, I had a relationship with the Hearst family that owned the Examiner and the Chronicle, all that. And I went in and I talked to the folks at the Chronicle. And I got them to agree. And Jose Simon, whose idea Comedy Celebration Day was,
Right.
because he didn't like it having a comedy competition that I had won. Robin didn't participate. Dana had won. He said, "No, this is not a way to do this. We want to celebrate comedy for everybody. No judging who's best." And I said, "Okay." So I asked them to help us celebrate Comedy Celebration Day. And the guy is sitting across, Phelps Dewey. God love him. He was hilarious. Hardcore conservative guy. But he's going to trust two idiot comedians, me and Jose. And Jose's sitting right next to me and he says, "I'm going to give you $100,000 in free publicity to draw the crowd, and I'm going to give you $30,000 in cash." And Jose is right at this point, Sean, he's pinching me under the table. He's this guy, he's hilarious. I'm punching him to stop pinching me. He's so excited because it was his idea. And Phelps Dewey says, "Jose, are you happy? This is your baby." And he goes, "This is the second happiest day of my entire life." And he goes, "Oh, okay, I get it, Jose. What was the first happen?" He goes, "When my brother Juanito was appointed to the Border Patrol." And we burst out laughing.
Oh, good God.
And if you can make a room full of guys who were newspaper bosses laugh like that, we were howling. I said, my pitch to them was laughter needs to be echoing across the nation to
Mhm.
relieve the anger, hostility, violence. You know, violence only has one or two directions: outward towards others and inwards towards the self. And in order to combat that, we have to take a look at what causes it. And they were right on board. And then who goes on to become the greatest spokesman? Robin Williams, Dana Carvey, Jerry Seinfeld, Whoopi Goldberg, teaching that comedy is a lifestyle, not a religion, but close to it.
But and
Being able
I'm
to
glad you
laugh
could
is to bring hope.
Well, I'm glad you gave me the backstory. I mistakenly said competition because I see it at the Civic Center all the time whenever
Oh
it's
yeah,
in,
I
September.
won that in 1980, and it was fun. I mean, I had a great time, but I was brand new. I had never done stand up before, but I was just starting in recovery, and it was my way out. It was my
Hmm.
I saw the candle lit,
Yep.
and I was like, this is the lighted way to go. And fortunately, I won. I went on the Johnny Carson show. I went on Merv Griffin and Mike Douglas, and then I was on an episode of Taxi. I played a gay disco dancer who danced with Judd Hirsch. And that,
Yeah. You want to tell this story? You told it to me when we talked last week or the week
yeah.
before, but folks, you got to hear this.
Well, I mean, it was like the odds of, he just passed away here recently, the director, Jimmy. And he was the sweetest man and the kind man, a smart man. And I walk in the gay bar, I walk in and I'm playing the pinball machine. And I turned around and I asked Judd Hirsch to dance. And I twirl him and I dip him and I did the tango with him. The crowd was laughing so hard. It's 1980. Never
Hmm.
seen a scene like this before. But they were howling like we had to come in and re-loop it in order to record the dialogue again because you couldn't hear the dialogue. People were laughing so hard. And it was at Paramount Studios. And somebody had said, aren't you afraid that would ruin your career? And I said, well, one would hope so. And they were howling, laughing. Later on, I went on to do a movie after that called Condom Sense to help young men with their choices. And I was with Jane Dornacher and Jeremy Kramer. And they used a lot of people from the comedy scene in it. And it was great to start feeling and moving that forward. And they also said again, oh, you're Catholic. You can't do that because that'll ruin your career. And I said, one would only hope so.
Hmm.
But ironically, in 1987, with the help of good friends who were priests, Father Harry Schlitt, Miles O'Brien Riley, Bishop Quinn, I opened for the Holy Father at Candlestick. And I got to watch all the firemen from San Francisco and all the cops and their families and kids get communion from the Pope at Mass. And then I went on a show with Father Guido Sarducci that's still on YouTube now called Vatican Inquirer. That guy's a genius too. And just to be part of that scene of using comedy to teach and laughter to uplift and to have those opportunities to do that for people and be in sobriety and being helpful to other people and saying, this is the way, come with me,
Hmm.
come with me, and come with all of us. And Robin, he struggled and he found his way, and God love him. He was alive in the Holy Spirit. And he knew when he filmed movies like Dead Poets Society, when he filmed Goodwill Hunting, when he did the Moscow on the Hudson, his soul, the poetry of his soul, spoke eloquently to all of us in America.
Yeah.
How powerful it is to have a person know that you're battling inside what is the problem with the fighting depression and hostility and addiction. Here's the gift: laughter, friendship, family, kids, grandkids. There's nothing like it. And that is enough to keep you sane and moving forward. And my grandkids are the greatest medicine to me. My little grandson made me laugh. And this is how you know how smart these kids are. I had one little boy who was a friend of my grandson. I won't say his name, but he's the sweetest kid. I said, hey, thanks for helping my grandson Braun out and being a kind of a protective force. I said, he's a pretty vulnerable, kid. He's a good kid, but he worries and he gets anxious because he's just trying this out. He's Russian and Irish. And this little guy, he's from a beautiful Jewish family. He says, his name is Mason. I shouldn't say his name, but this kid,
Hmm.
he's a light. He said, Mr. Pritchard, have you ever noticed that there are so many people in the world who are lonely? And they struggle with being lonely. And unless you build the bridge to their heart and ask them to build the bridge to yours, they could be lonely all their entire life unless they learn that. How to be a friend to another person and allow them in. And you have to be the one who kind of first steps out to walk across the bridge. John, I go, how old are you?
Yeah.
7. And I'm crying. I have tears streaming down my face. And I looked at my daughter. I said, are you kidding me? A
Yeah.
7-year-old is teaching. Yale and Harvard guys and women would charge you $400 for the session and
Yeah.
never quite come to the spirit and heart of that. Remarkable.
Yeah.
And they're here, Sean, I swear to you by all I hold holy, they're here to save us. And we've got to unplug our ears and stop thinking that systems have answers. Because plainly, with no intention to describe in anything political, systems have failed us at
Yeah.
times, but hearts will not. And children's heart, especially. Later on, when I realized how smart my grandson was, I said, me and grandma want to put that milk thistle out there because you know what, Braun? You need to know these beautiful butterflies flying around the garden, monarch butterflies. They climb up into the cocoon, into that little chrysalis, and then they fly around the garden. And he looks at me, John, he goes, well, actually not, Grandpa. What happens is they fly to Pacific Grove, California, and they anchor themselves in the bark of trees to preserve their energy for the 2,000-mile trip to Cuernavaca, where they lay their eggs and then they expire, but their family members come back. I go, where did that come from? What are you talking about? And he goes, you don't watch Wildcrats, and I watch Wildcrats. If you watch Wildcrats, you would know that, and you should watch Wildcrats because you work with kids. You'd be more informed.
What? Oh my God.
7 years old, and I'm like, that's what's coming our way to save us, sir. That's what's coming our way.
So we're gonna wrap up here, and I'm gonna give you
Yeah,
last words, but I'm gonna just tee it up with this story because you're talking about these stories of kids. We started with kids and the wisdom and the innocence of children and the beauty of that. And I had a very rare privilege to be sitting by a gentleman who has done much like you and Robin and so many other people, spread through arts and entertainment this opportunity to carry a message of hope and carry a message of love. And that gentleman is a blind guy. We sang, Amazing Grace, and I had a chance to sit on a couch next to Stevie Wonder at a mixed match
yeah,
event. And I'm like, kind of like starstruck. I'm like, what do I say? And I don't even remember what he said, but just being there as I got an opportunity to say, you know what? Thank you for spreading love. And all through high school, when my dad took off, I listened to that Songs in the Key of Life over and over and
yes,
over and over
yeah,
and over and over again. And Intervision. And one of the lyrics of his songs is let the children lead the way. Teach them well, and let them lead the way. Let
yes,
them show us all the beauty that we have inside.
yes,
And I want you to riff on that because you get last words to talk to the person who's out there that is lonely, Miss Michael, who is hurting, who needs to know that there is somebody out there who is available and willing to listen, to guide, and to love them whether they know them or not, because you are on the front lines and you have a direct access to the resources far more than I do. So you get the last show. Folks, in advance, this is Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You. Follow the show, share the show. If when this episode comes out, share it with anybody you love because that's why I wanted Michael on the show. You get last words today.
The only thing I can think of is, I go to poetry and scripture all the time. And one of my favorite poems is from a cancer camp up north in Sonoma County. And I was thinking about this the other day, and it was written by a lady named Nellie Lincoln. And she had this line I loved. On the road of life, you only have one constant companion. So make sure that you become good company for yourself. But sometimes we need to make sure that we have the other company with us. So she wrote a poem, which I find profound. And it's a cancer camp for children up there, St. Dorothy's Rest. And the poem goes, "Oh, the winds of God are blowing, so keep your sails unfurled. And the winds of God will take you to the safe harbors of the world, forever full of power to take you where you will, forever full of grace if there are sails to fill. So take the helm, be master, unfurl your sail, your part, and the winds of God will take you to the safe harbors of your heart." And when I'm with little kids, I tell them, "What's the best ship to sail on?" And they all go, "Friendship, friendship." That's what gets us through. To have people that love us sometimes more than we love ourselves. To
Mhm.
have an older addict that I climb up onto these bypasses to bring egg burritos to a guy and I'm feeding him. And I said, I just had to deal with the suicide of a man worth millions of dollars. And he stares at me. He's an old vet, toothless vet. And he looks at me and goes, "Wait a minute. You telling me somebody worth millions of dollars just took their life and I'm sitting up here holding on with every fiber of my brain, beginning to see if something could happen for me. And you're giving me this egg burrito?" And I go, "That's what I'm telling you, Sam." And then we hear this noise behind us, which teaches you that you're on the streets of America. A lady comes up out of a pile of garbage. She goes, "When you two idiots are done with your little bromance, would you shut up? I'm trying to get some shut eye."
Oh God. Oh, Michael, this is a gift. You are a gift. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I just want you to know two things. I've worked with firemen all my life. I've worked with cops and firemen, both in recovery and outside of recovery. And if we know that forgive to live and live to forgive is that no matter what happens to them on their journey, many of them suffer so much they can't share. I know I've seen things at these school shootings that I can't bring home to my family, that I can't talk about. And they sit locked down inside me. And I get sometimes irritable. I get sometimes frustrated with the lack of civility and the lack of humility and the lack of acceptance that there are others out there. Pain shared is pain divide, and compassion shared is compassion multiplied. Share that. And every once in a while, when you hear my voice in your head, go tell your dad thanks for all those years from me.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard.
All right, sir. Take care of yourself. God bless and keep you, sir.
Until next time, Michael Pritchard,
Absolutely.
John Langwall, dare to be great, dare to be you. Love you, buddy.
Love you too, brother. Take care of yourself.